Hi there. This is not a story about glory, honor, or great deeds. This is a chronicle of slow, dull survival on the edge of the world, where dirt soaks into your bones and fear burrows into your mind. Here, the law is just a word, and the sheriff is a tired person who every morning pins on his tarnished badge, only to dive once again into the routine of poverty, despair, and endless human foolishness. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is for you. I am really curious to see who has joined us. Now, settle in and get comfortable. We are about to begin. You open your eyes to the grayish nothing of another morning, greeted first not by sunlight or the sound of birds, but by the persistent, dry itch in your nose and throat. There is dust everywhere, as there always is. Dust on the floorboards, dust in your hair, dust on the single window where someone, probably you, once tried to scratch a view out of the grime. The bedsheet is damp and clammy. You roll over and something under your shoulder crunches, probably just a breadcrumb or perhaps a fragment of last night's hard tack, which passes for bread in these parts. The ceiling sags above you, coated with long, yellowish stains that could be water, could be tobacco, could be something else. You stare at those stains for a while, trying to guess the shapes. Some days you think you see a map of your town up there, but today it just looks like a graveyard. There are never any good omens in this place. You are the sheriff, which is less a badge of honor than an inherited curse. This morning, like every morning, you wonder who you wronged to get stuck in this corner of the West, where the wind never stops and nobody remembers your name unless they need something. Out the window, the sky is neither blue nor gray, but a sickly in between, as if the sun itself is too bored to rise properly. The first sounds you register are the familiar ones. The shriek of a rooster who seems to have made it his life's work to wake the entire street at ungodly hours, and the barking of a dog that you do not own. There is a dull thud somewhere below you, someone dropping a boot, maybe, or someone's patience giving out before breakfast. You lie there for a while, contemplating the list of things you would rather do than get up. That list includes dying, but you have been on that edge before, and it never seems to stick. After all, being sheriff is mostly about surviving until the next pointless crisis. Eventually, necessity wins. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and immediately regret it. The floorboards are ice cold, even though it has not been truly cold here for weeks. The first thing you do every single morning is check your boots. You learned that the hard way after waking up to the sensation of something crawling over your toes. A scorpion, of course, and not even a big one, but the pain lasted a week. So now you pick up each boot, shake it, bang it against the leg of the bed, and peer inside as if you might see the face of God or the devil. Most days, you find only more dust. Once, you found a half-eaten mouse. That was a good day. It meant the cat was still alive and working. You pull on your boots, wincing at the scrape of old blisters and the feel of grit against your skin. You have told yourself you will wash them out, maybe even buy a new pair, but every penny here is already spent on things less optional than comfort. Besides, nobody ever remembers the feet of a sheriff. If they did, they might send socks with their complaints. There is a cracked pitcher on the washstand. You splash your face with water the color of weak tea. You tell yourself you will get used to the taste, to the chalk and iron, and whatever else has seeped in, but you never do. You stare at yourself in the mirror, a rare luxury, since glass is expensive out here, and this one is more silver than clear. You barely recognize the face staring back. It is the face of a man who is always tired, always dirty, always carrying the burden of every wrong in the town. Behind you, a fly buzzes against the window pane, struggling and failing and struggling again. You watch it for a while. It will probably die before noon. You feel a certain kinship. In the next room, something falls. Maybe a shelf, or maybe your deputy, who sleeps less than you do and drinks twice as much. You hear the scrape of chair legs, the low mutter of someone cursing at the unfairness of life, or maybe just at you. You do not bother to answer. You know you are nobody's favorite. You look at the badge on your nightstand, a dull piece of tin that has not shone in years. You pin it to your shirt anyway, because that is the ritual, and because it is the only thing that separates you from everyone else in this town. A badge, and the expectation that you will solve problems nobody else wants to touch. You stand at the window for a long moment, looking out over the one street, the three buildings that matter, the dozen more that are halfway to ruin, and the endless, empty horizon beyond. The wind picks up, whistling through cracks in the wall. You shiver and tell yourself it is only the morning chill. You have not even made it out of your room, and already you are exhausted. But there is nothing to do except go on, because someone always needs something. A stolen chicken, a broken fence, a body in the street. Life out here is a series of small tragedies, and you are the only one left to write them down. You step into your day, boots scraping, heart heavy, mind already half asleep. You know, as you always do, that tomorrow will be exactly the same. You shuffle down the narrow hallway, boots thudding with the weight of a long day that has not even started yet. The sun has barely bothered to rise, but already the air is thick with the scent of old sweat, dust, and something indefinably sour. In your kitchen, if one could call it that, you find the remains of yesterday's bread, now hard enough to break a tooth, and the battered coffee pot waiting on the stove like an old enemy. The bread is your first challenge. You saw it fresh once, delivered by the baker's boy with hands nearly as filthy as your own. That was 2 days ago, or maybe 3. It no longer matters. Now, it is just a brittle slab you must chisel apart with a knife so blunt it could pass for a butter spreader. Still, you persevere because out here, hunger will never wait politely. Your deputy sits slumped at the scarred wooden table, his hat pulled low over his eyes, pretending to sleep. The truth is, neither of you have slept well for weeks, but it is easier to fake it than to admit defeat. You grunt a greeting. He grunts back. The coffee is next. Brewing it is not an act of love, but of war. The beans were already stale when they arrived on the last supply wagon, which was so late you almost shot the driver out of spite. The water is, as ever, a questionable shade, and you remind yourself that boiling it is less about taste and more about killing off anything still alive in the bottom of the kettle. You pour the grounds in, far too many, because weak coffee is a sin in this house, and set the pot over the fire. The flames sputter and spit as if even they cannot be bothered with this place. After a few minutes, the room fills with the sharp, almost chemical aroma of what passes for breakfast. You pour 2 tin mugs full, careful not to let the sludge escape into the cup, though it always does. You hand a mug to your deputy. He lifts it, sniffs, and recoils. You do not blame him. This coffee is not meant for pleasure. It is meant for survival, for scraping the sleep out of your skull and facing another day of complaints and disappointment. You break your bread, gnawing on it like a dog with a bone. Every bite reminds you that teeth are a luxury, and you hope yours last at least another year. There is a smear of butter left on the plate, a tiny yellow miracle that you have been rationing for days. You think about how much easier it would be to give up, to just let the hunger gnaw at your belly. But the memory of real food keeps you going. Outside, the town begins to stir. You hear boots in the street, the sharp voice of the undertaker arguing with the blacksmith about a debt that will never be paid. Someone is already yelling about missing chickens. The rooster crows again, as if daring you to come outside and face the day. Your deputy finishes his coffee in 2 gulps, wincing as the last of the grounds catch in his teeth. He looks at you over the rim of his mug. You know, he says, voice rough as gravel, I think this coffee could kill a horse. You nod, because he is probably right. You have watched men fall off their chairs from less. Breakfast ends, as it always does, not with satisfaction, but with resignation. You scrape the crumbs into your palm, debating whether to eat them or save them for later. Out here, nothing goes to waste, not even a mouthful of stale bread. You stand, stretching the aches from your back, and look at the coffee pot. There is still a little left at the bottom, thick and oily. You consider pouring it over your boots to kill whatever might be living in them. Instead, you toss it out the back door, where it splashes in the dirt and sends a pair of crows flapping off in disgust. Your deputy stands too, setting his mug on the table with a dull thunk. The two of you do not say much. There is nothing to say. The routine is older than both of you put together. Eat, drink, and wait for trouble to find you. You take one last look at the kitchen, the plate, the pot, the crumbs, all evidence of another day survived. Nothing here is ever clean. Nothing here is ever finished. Life on the edge of nowhere is an endless repetition of the same small miseries, each one as dull and heavy as the last. You pull on your hat, adjust your badge, and prepare to step outside. The town will need you soon enough, for reasons that will never be good. The coffee sits in your gut like a stone. You wonder if it will be enough to keep you going until sundown. It never is. You open the door to a world that looks exactly like the one you left behind yesterday, and you tell yourself, as you do every morning, that maybe today will be different. You know it will not be. Out here, hope is just another thing that went stale long ago. You step outside, squinting into the early morning light, if it can be called that. The air carries a bitter edge, heavy with the promise of another dry, sweltering day. The street is not a street, not really. It is a rut in the earth, a furrow of dried mud and horse dung running between the buildings that squat along its length. Your boots crunch on gravel, then sink into something soft that you do not care to identify. You look down, decide to keep moving, and hope whatever it is was not alive recently. Your daily patrol is less a matter of duty and more a dance of avoidance. There are only so many places worth inspecting. You start with the outhouse behind the jail, a listing shack barely held together by rusted nails and the collective desperation of the townsfolk. The stench is biblical. Flies swirl in black clouds, and every so often you hear a splash that reminds you there is life everywhere, even here, where life has no business existing. No one in this town will admit to using the sheriff's outhouse, yet everyone seems to leave a piece of themselves behind. You open the door, glance inside, and decide that justice can wait. Some crimes are too great even for you. From there, you walk the length of Main Street, if that is what they are calling it this year. 3 buildings with painted signs, the apothecary, the saloon, and the blacksmith, stand in a row like broken teeth. The apothecary's window is streaked with grime. Inside, you can see the hunched shadow of Old Man Wicks, counting bottles as if any of them contain real medicine. They do not. You know this because you have been inside more than once with a wound or a headache or a hangover. All he ever offers is a mixture of willow bark, whiskey, and the hope that you are too tired to care. You nod at Wicks, who ignores you, and move on. The blacksmith's forge is already roaring, the heat rippling out across the street. There is a horse tied to the post, a tired gray mare that looks at you with the same dead-eyed indifference you see in your own reflection. Next to the mare lies a heap of iron tools, a coil of rope, and the broken remains of someone's wagon wheel. You hear the blacksmith cursing as he hammers a shoe into place. He has been drunk since last autumn, but his hands are steady and his temper is legendary. You give the forge a wide berth. Past the blacksmith is the butcher, if you can call a man who lives off rabbits and luck a butcher. The door is propped open, letting out the smell of spoiled meat. Flies cluster here too, having learned that no matter how many times you wave them away, there will always be more flesh to chew. You make a mental note to mention it at the next town meeting. Then remember there has not been a real meeting since the last fire, which was 3 months ago. The next stop is the saloon. You do not need to enter yet. The sounds leaking from behind the swinging doors tell you everything you need to know. There is laughter, the clink of glasses, the distant whine of the out-of-tune piano, and the unmistakable thud of a fist meeting flesh. This early in the day, It is probably just the regulars working out old grievances over stale beer and worse whiskey. You cross the street, weaving between ruts and hoof prints, and pause in front of the general store. Its owner, Mrs. Kramer, is sweeping dust off the steps, which is an exercise in futility. She glances at you with a look that is half warning, half invitation. You have long since learned not to ask which. She never complains, never asks for help, and never forgets a debt. You nod, she nods back, and the world keeps turning. At the edge of town stands the church, a squat structure with peeling paint and a bell that rings only when someone dies. The doors are closed. The preacher is inside, no doubt praying for salvation that will not arrive on the morning stagecoach. He nods at you through the cracked window as if he knows your sins and has decided to forgive you anyway. You do not believe him. You circle back towards the jail, which sits next to your own battered house, because that way you can pretend there is some order in your life. The jail is just 2 rooms and a holding cell, and more often than not, you find yourself locking the door from the inside at night just to feel safer. You pass the window, check the lock, and try not to notice the growing pile of paperwork on your desk. You look up and down the street, counting the people who have bothered to come outside. There are not many. A few children dart between houses, their laughter sharp and bright in the still air. A pair of old men sit on the porch of the boarding house, arguing about something you cannot quite hear, most likely who owes whom for last week's poker game. There is no hurry here, only the slow, grinding inertia of survival. You make your way back towards the saloon, where trouble tends to gather like rain clouds. The swinging doors beckon, promising shelter from the heat and a front row seat to the daily parade of disappointments. You linger for a moment, listening to the muffled voices and trying to summon the energy to care. This is your routine, your circuit, your endless march through dust and boredom. You tell yourself it is important that you are maintaining order, keeping the peace. In truth, you are just counting the hours until you can crawl back into your bed and forget that any of this matters. Somewhere, a dog barks, a bottle breaks, a child cries, and the wind carries it all away. Another day in paradise. You do not make it halfway down the street before you hear your name, shouted, not spoken, as though the speaker expects you to be both deaf and guilty. You sigh and turn, bracing yourself. No one calls the sheriff unless they are angry, desperate, or both. This time, it is Mrs. Johnson, wrapped in her eternal shawl despite the rising heat, eyes narrowed and finger pointed like a loaded gun. You, she says, as if there might be another sheriff hiding in the dust. It happened again, last night. My chicken gone. And do not tell me it is just bad luck, because I know it is that Perkins boy or his father. You promised you would do something. You blink once, twice. There is a pecking order here, and you are always at the bottom of it. Mrs. Johnson is not a tall woman, but she makes up for it with sheer volume. If anyone in this town could scare away a thief, you suspect it would be her. Yet here she is, demanding justice for a missing chicken. You nod, as you always do, and pull out your battered notebook. The cover is torn, the pages yellowed with age and the sweat of your hands. Every morning, the same ritual: record the grievances, promise resolution, watch hope die behind someone's eyes. You ask the questions, though you already know the answers. What time did she notice the chicken was gone? Sometime after sundown, before the coyote started howling. Did she hear anything? Only the usual racket, the kind that means nothing until something is missing. Any tracks? Only her own, circling the coop in the moonlight, and perhaps one that might belong to a boot or a raccoon or something worse. Did she lock the door? She says yes, but you both know it does not matter. Locks here are little more than suggestions. You jot it all down, careful to write in whole words, because even your own handwriting refuses to be hurried. The notebook is half full of missing livestock: chickens, goats, once even a pig that turned up drunk in the saloon a week later. You make a mental note to ask about that someday, but not now. There is no justice for chickens. Mrs. Johnson watches you, her lips pursed, arms folded, waiting for a promise. You give her one, because that is all you have left to give. I will look into it, you say, your voice flat as old bread. She sniffs, unimpressed. You said that last time, and what happened? The next night, another chicken gone. You know what I think? I think you do not care about the decent people in this town. If it was the preacher's hen, you would be out with a lantern before dawn. You open your mouth to protest, but she is already turning away, her wrath spent for the morning. She disappears into her house, leaving the door open just long enough for you to see the rest of her flock, half as many as last week, all pecking the dirt with nervous, jerky motions. You stand there, notebook in hand, feeling the sun rise higher and the weight of the town's disappointment settle on your shoulders. You glance down the street toward the Perkins place, but know it is pointless. If the Perkins boy took the chicken, he has already eaten it or traded it for a bottle of cheap whiskey. If it was a fox or a coyote, it is halfway to Mexico by now. Still, you walk toward the coop, boots stirring up a cloud of dust with every step. The Johnson coop is a sad affair, cobbled together from old boards and rusted wire. You crouch and inspect the ground. There are tracks, but they mean nothing. Everything with feet comes through here sooner or later. You poke at the latch, which hangs loose, its screw long since stripped. You shake your head, not for the first time, at the optimism that keeps people putting chickens in coops and expecting them to stay there. From inside the coop, a single hen clucks at you, sounding as if she too blames you for the general decline of law and order. You tip your hat to her, a small gesture of apology for being the wrong man in the wrong place. She flutters her wings, unimpressed. You stand and take a slow walk around the Johnson yard. There is a vegetable patch, half eaten by rabbits. There is a woodpile, home to a family of snakes. There is, as always, the faint sense of futility that hangs over everything. You see a scrap of cloth snagged on a fence post, a clue maybe, or maybe just laundry left too long in the wind. You add it to your mental collection of meaningless evidence. You turn to leave, only to find Mrs. Johnson at the window, watching you like a hawk. She says nothing, just narrows her eyes, as if daring you to solve her problem. You nod again, the universal gesture of lawmen everywhere. I see you, I hear you, I am not going to fix this, but I want you to think I might. Back on the street, you thumb through your notebook, the page with Mrs. Johnson's complaint looks exactly like all the others. Columns of dates, names, accusations, possible suspects, and photons that never arrive. The ink blots look like chicken tracks, wandering off the edge of the paper. You walk away, telling yourself that you will look into it, that you will ask around, that you will find the thief. You will do none of these things. You know, as everyone does, that the true crime is expecting anything to improve. Still, you add a fresh line to your notes because ritual is all you have left. Mrs. Johnson, chicken, missing, suspects, everyone. You tuck the notebook back in your pocket, already bracing yourself for the next complaint, the next disappointment, the next reminder that out here, justice is just another animal, always running, always just out of reach. You know it is coming before you even see it. The saloon is the beating, bleeding heart of the town, a battered box of warped boards and painted lies, promising more than it can ever deliver. By midday, the place is already half full of men and women who are too tired to care and too stubborn to leave. You push open the swinging doors, the wood sticky beneath your hand, and step inside. The first thing that hits you is the smell: sour beer, bad tobacco, and something underneath it all that is almost sweet, almost like decay. Sunlight slants in through dirty windows, painting bars of light across the haze. Behind the counter, the barkeep polishes a glass that will never be clean, his face set in that expression all barkeeps wear, the one that says he is here because he has nowhere else to go. The tables are already crowded. The regulars huddle together, passing the same jokes, the same bottle, the same disappointments from hand to hand. At the far end, the piano sits silent. Nobody plays before sunset, not unless the undertaker gets hold of the keys. There is music here, but it is the kind that happens when teeth hit wood and glass breaks on the floor. You scan the room. It does not take long to spot the trouble. In the corner by the window, two men are already halfway to a fight, faces red, voices raised, fists clenched around empty mugs. You recognize them: old Jenkins, who claims to own half the valley, and young Baker, who claims to care. Their argument is as old as the town itself. Today, it is about the price of oats. Yesterday, it was about the shape of clouds. Tomorrow, it will be about nothing at all. You walk over, boots thumping, the spurs a dull punctuation in the noisy room. The men do not see you at first. They are too busy shouting, spitting out words that sting as much as fists. It is robbery, that is what it is, Jenkins roars, slamming his hand on the table so hard that the mugs jump. You and your family, cheating decent folks out of their winter feed. Baker, all sinew and nerves, leans in, eyes flashing. If you call that feed, you are blinder than your mule. My oats are the best this side of the river, and you know it. The crowd shifts, sensing blood, or at least the promise of something different than the usual afternoon misery. The barkeep sighs, wiping his hands on a rag that has seen better centuries. You raise your hand, but nobody looks your way. Here, law has no voice unless it shouts. You clear your throat once, twice, until the room quiets a little. Enough, you say, keeping your tone flat. The next man to throw a punch spends the night in my cell, maybe two. Jenkins turns, his face twisted into something almost comic. What are you going to do, Sheriff? Arrest us for talking? Maybe you want the oats for yourself. The room laughs, a low, tired sound. You have heard this before, every time someone wants to see if the sheriff is still listening. You do not take the bait. Instead, you set your hand on your belt, close to the badge, not the gun. If I wanted oats, you say, I would grow them myself. Now, I have had one chicken go missing today, and I do not need two grown men going the same way. Sit down, finish your drinks, or go outside and work this out with shovels. Either way, you are not doing it in here. There is a moment when nobody moves, nobody breathes. Then Jenkins snorts and sits back, muttering about lawmen with nothing better to do. Baker grins, though there is nothing friendly in it, and leans away from the table, watching you like a fox watches a trap. You let the tension bleed out of the room, slow as syrup. The others go back to their talk, their cards, their silent prayers that the afternoon will pass without another funeral. The barkeep slides you a mug filled with beer as thin as rainwater. On the house, he says, though you know it will end up on your tab. You take a sip, grimace, and set it aside. There is a taste in the back of your throat, something like rust, something like regret. You lean against the bar, eyes on the door, knowing the peace will not last. It never does. Outside, the sun climbs higher. Inside, the noise swells again, the argument forgotten, replaced by laughter that sounds too sharp to be real. Jenkins and Baker glare at each other, but their hands stay at their sides. You know they will fight again, maybe tomorrow, maybe tonight. You will break it up again and again until the world ends or one of them finally wins. You finish your beer, if it can be called that, and thank the barkeep with a nod. He shrugs, already turning away, already lost in thought about the next mess to clean. You step away from the bar, moving through the press of bodies, your boots sticky on the floor. Someone slaps you on the back too hard, and you barely resist the urge to turn and shout. It is always the same. Law is entertainment, justice a sideshow. You pause by the door, hand resting on the swinging wood, and look back at the room. For a moment, you wonder what it would be like to sit at one of those tables, to lose yourself in the slow drift of drink and time. But you are not a regular. You are the sheriff. You are a fixture, a piece of furniture that nobody wants, but everyone expects. You step back into the sunlight, blinking, and breathe in the dry, empty air. The argument behind you fades, replaced by the familiar chorus of flies, wind, and the distant sound of hammers at the forge. Your heart is heavy, your head aching, and your hands already itching for something to do. There is no peace here, only pauses. You know this as surely as you know the weight of your own badge. Out here, boredom is as dangerous as any outlaw, and the dust never settles for long. The saloon fades behind you as you make your way back toward the jail. The building waits at the end of the street like a mouth missing too many teeth. Every time you see it, you think it looks a little smaller, a little sadder, just another shack among the many, pretending to be important. 2 rooms, a rusted sign, and the cell that has seen more drunks than desperados. Inside, the air is stale and close, thick with the kind of sourness that seeps into your clothes and stays for days. There is a single window, nailed half shut, which lets in more dust than light. Most of the furniture is handmade, and none of it is straight. The desk is a relic, its top scarred by knife marks and ink stains, its drawers jammed with old reports and the occasional mouse nest. You pause by the holding cell, peering through the bars. More often than not, your prisoner is one of your own townsfolk, men caught fighting, women caught stealing, a runaway child once, and, most often of all, Old Bill, the town drunk. He is there now, curled on the cot in a pile of rags, snoring so loudly it rattles the hinges. Bill is as much a fixture as you are. You could set your watch by his benders if you owned a watch, which you do not, because a sheriff who knows the time is a sheriff who counts the hours until he can quit. Bill groans, stirs, and then lets out a sigh, the unmistakable sound of a man who has surrendered even the hope of dignity. His hair is gray, his face the color of bad beef, and you do not want to think about when he last bathed. You open the cell door and stand there, waiting for him to notice. He does not. You poke him with your boot, gentle as you can manage. Bill, time to get up. You are missing half the day. He rolls over, mutters something about damned chickens, and tries to burrow deeper into the cot. You let him have a few more minutes. You know how it feels. The cell is a world unto itself, a kingdom of sweat, straw, and dried stains you stopped trying to identify. The cot sags in the middle, the straw ticking replaced every few months. Usually, when the smell gets so bad, you threaten to burn the place down. The bucket in the corner is full, always full. Cleaning it is your job too, and you cannot remember the last time someone thanked you for it. You glance at the walls, counting the gouges. Some are from knives, some from fingernails, some from rats. There are names carved in the wood, half of them spelled wrong, all of them a testament to the fleeting importance of their authors. You know most of the stories: the boy who tried to run away, the gambler who thought he could cheat the wrong man, the woman who spent one night in here after a brawl at the boarding house. They all left something behind. Sometimes you think the cell knows more about the town than you ever will. Bill finally sits up, rubbing his eyes with fists as big as hams. He blinks at you, confused, then remembers where he is and slumps. Can I go? He asks, the same as every time. You nod. You know the way out. He stands, joints popping, and stumbles past you, muttering thanks that you know he does not mean. You watch him shuffle down the street, already heading toward the saloon. The circle completes itself. You close the cell door behind him, listening to the familiar squeal of the hinges. For a moment, the silence is complete. You sink down at your desk and stare at the pile of reports. Half of them are complaints about noise, the other half about livestock, and the rest are just notes you have written to yourself, reminders to check the well, to patch the roof, to remember to breathe. Your badge sits heavy on your chest. You run your finger over the dented metal, feeling every scratch, every blow. You remember the first night you wore it, how proud you were, how certain you were that you could change something. That feeling is long gone, worn away by nights like this, by days spent herding drunks and scraping mud off the floor. You make a half hearted attempt to clean. The broom is more splinters than straw. The dustpan is bent and useless. You sweep anyway, knowing it will be just as bad tomorrow. There is a hole in the roof that lets in rain, a crack in the wall that lets in wind, and a rumor that the cell is haunted by the ghost of a horse thief who died coughing up blood. You have never seen him, but sometimes, late at night, you think you hear hoofbeats in the empty streets. You look around and see your life laid bare: a cot, a bucket, a desk, a chair, a badge, and an endless parade of men like Bill, lost and tired and waiting for someone to save them from themselves. You are not sure you are up to the task. A shadow crosses the window. It is just a bird, or maybe the preacher's dog. But for a moment, you allow yourself to imagine that someone is coming with news, with hope, with anything other than another complaint. You know better. You close your eyes, count to 10, and then open them again. Nothing has changed. The cell is still empty, the desk still full, the sun still creeping across the floor like a prisoner serving time. You stand up, stretch, and wonder if the next time you end up in the cell, it will be by choice. Before you leave, you check the lock, test the bars, and glance one last time at the names carved in the wood. Each one is a reminder that nobody stays here forever, even you, though it sometimes feels otherwise. You step outside, blinking at the daylight, and for a moment, you almost wish Bill would come back. At least then you would have someone to talk to. Instead, there is only the wind, the dust, and the long, empty road ahead. This is your second home, and like everything else in this town, it is waiting for someone else to take your place. By midday, the sun is a hammer overhead, flattening the town and its inhabitants into thin, resentful shadows. You have not even had time to finish sorting the endless pile of half written reports before the next ritual of the day begins. There is no courthouse here, not even a judge. You are the court, the law, the witness, and the bailiff, all rolled into one person with a badge made of cheap tin and a chair that wobbles if you lean too far to the left. The court convenes wherever you can find space and shade. Most days, it is just a cluster of townsfolk gathering in the patch of dust outside the jail, squinting at each other through the glare, fanning themselves with hats or the backs of their hands. You settle yourself on the porch step, clutching your notebook, and prepare to preside over the proceedings. There is no gavel, no formality, and no hope for dignity. There is only heat, dust, and the sharp smell of old sweat. Today's docket is full, though every matter is small enough to fit in your palm. The first case, a dispute between two ranchers about a fence that has apparently moved 2 feet in the night. Both men are convinced the other is a liar and a thief. Both present their arguments with more passion than you have seen in a church service. You listen, nodding, scribbling something in your notebook, though you know you will never read it again. In the end, you issue a verdict that satisfies neither and send them home to stew until next week. Next, you hear the case of Mrs. Kramer's goat, which allegedly ate Mrs. Bell's prize cabbages. Mrs. Kramer insists her goat is innocent, Mrs. Bell swears on her dead husband's grave that she saw the animal with her own 2 eyes, as clear as the Lord's own day. You suggest that Mrs. Bell put up a better fence. Mrs. Bell calls you useless, Mrs. Kramer smirks, and the goat, tethered at the edge of the crowd, looks as if it would eat the sun if given the chance. There are debts to settle, accusations of cheating at cards, and at least 2 complaints about noisy conduct after dark. You listen to each in turn, your mind drifting in and out, the voices blending together like wind in the grass. Sometimes you have to shout to be heard over the arguing, but most times your authority is as thin as the hope that next year will be easier. On rare occasions, someone brings you a case that matters: a missing child, a dead animal, a real theft. On those days, you feel the weight of your office pressing down, a heavy hand on your shoulder. Today is not one of those days. Today, the greatest crime is a missing pie, and you are expected to find it or else admit that the world has no order left in it at all. You hand out punishments with the same care you use for everything else: quick, simple, and designed to minimize trouble. A fine here, a promise to work off a debt there. When someone cannot pay, you assign them chores: mend a fence, haul water, sweep the church porch. It is justice of a kind, but nobody is ever satisfied. They grumble, they glare, they promise revenge or forgiveness, and then drift away, the dust swirling behind them like ghosts. Through it all, you maintain the fiction of law and order. You keep your voice steady, your face blank, your badge visible. You know, and then everyone else knows, that this is all for show. The real decisions are made later, over cards or in dark corners, when the sun has gone down and the only rule left is survival. By the time you finish, the crowd has thinned. Only a few linger, arguing quietly or just watching you, waiting for something exciting to happen. You stand, stretch your back, and look out at the town: a handful of buildings, a scattering of animals, a dozen lives all tangled together by accident and necessity. You record the day's verdicts in your notebook, careful to write each word in full, though you wonder who will ever read them. Maybe your successor, maybe a historian, maybe nobody. The pages fill up, line after line of petty squabbles and minor tragedies, until you are not sure which is more ridiculous, the idea that these things matter or the idea that they do not. Your deputy, who has been lurking on the edge of the crowd, ambles over with a look that says he would rather be anywhere else. Anything serious today? He asks, scratching his neck. You shake your head. Only the usual fences, goats, noise, misses. Kramer's pie is missing again. He snorts. Maybe she should keep it locked up with her goat. You almost smile. Almost. Instead, you gather your things, stand, and dust off your trousers. The townsfolk drift away, their grievances unresolved but aired, at least for now. The world is no more just than it was before you started. You glance at the sun, which has barely moved in the sky. There are still hours to go before night, still time for more complaints, more arguments, more tiny battles that nobody will win. You tuck your notebook into your pocket, feeling its weight, and tell yourself you are maintaining order. You know you are only keeping the peace, and only for as long as the crowd is watching. Justice, out here, is a shadow that lengthens as the day wears on. By nightfall, it will be gone. You head back toward the jail, the porch creaking beneath your boots, and take a seat in the shade, waiting for whatever comes next. By the afternoon, the air has turned flat and sour, heavy enough to press the hope out of your bones. The sun hovers overhead, as if waiting to see who will break first. You, the earth, or the handful of souls that call this place home. You are back at your desk, sweating through your shirt, notebook open, pencil poised to record the next small disaster. This is the hour for lost things, lost chickens, lost tempers, and more often than you would like, lost people. It starts the way it always does. A knock at the door, sharp and hesitant, like someone unsure if it is better to ask for help or just give up. You do not bother to stand. You shout for them to come in, and in steps Mrs. Evans, wringing her hands in the folds of her apron. Her face is pinched with worry, though she tries to smile. She sits on the edge of the chair as if afraid her grief might spread if she settles in too deeply. It's Tom, she says, voice thin as chicken broth. He did not come home last night. Said he was just going out to the pasture, but, well, I looked all morning and there's nothing, not a sign. You nod, flipping to the next blank page in your notebook. This story is older than the town, and you have heard it 100 times. You ask her to tell it again anyway. When did she last see him? What was he wearing? Was he drinking? Did he have a quarrel with anyone? She answers, quietly, the way people do when they already know there will be no miracle. You jot the details down, words neat and deliberate. You ask if she wants to organize a search party. She shakes her head. You tell her you will keep an eye out. You tell her Tom is probably just sleeping it off, that men wander sometimes, that he will come back when he is hungry. You do not say the rest. You do not say that the prairie swallows men like rain. You do not say that last month a boy disappeared chasing a runaway mule, and when you found him, there was nothing left but his hat and a boot. You do not mention that the river has a taste for secrets, or that the hills are pockmarked with caves where the wind and coyotes do the rest. She leaves, a little comforted, but not much. You promise to check the fields. You will, but not until the sun goes down, when the heat is less murderous and the shadows do not play tricks on your mind. You add Tom Evans to the list. Another name, another date, another question mark in a growing line of vanished people. The list is tucked into the back of your notebook, where you keep the records nobody wants to see. There is no pattern to it, just bad luck, bad judgment, and sometimes you suspect bad intentions. The town expects you to look. They expect you to search, to question, to ride out beyond the edge of what is safe and bring their lost ones home. But you know how it goes. Most searches end in silence or in finding something you wish you had not. Once you found a man halfway to the next county, wild eyed and raving about ghosts. Another time, you found only bones, picked clean by animals that do not care about missing persons or grieving families. You set out anyway. You take your horse, who is no happier to be out in the sun than you are, and ride slow circles around the town's edge. You check the fields, the dry creek bed, the abandoned shacks where drifters sometimes sleep. You find nothing but dust, animal tracks, and the evidence of a life interrupted, a dropped handkerchief, a broken fence post, an empty bottle half buried in the dirt. You pause at the Evans place, tipping your hat to Mrs. Evans as she watches from the porch. You want to tell her something useful, something hopeful, but all you have is dust in your throat and the knowledge that some people simply disappear. She offers you a glass of water, which you accept, more out of ritual than thirst. The water is warm, tastes faintly of iron, but you drink it anyway, feeling the futility of it settle into your bones. Riding farther out, you scan the horizon for movement, anything that might be Tom, anything that might be trouble. The prairie is endless, empty, a graveyard for the careless and unlucky. You think about all the people who have gone missing over the years. You think about the stories they left behind, the lives that moved on without them, the way their names fade into the dust like everything else. You return to town as the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the street. You tie up your horse, wipe the sweat from your face, and try not to think about the places you did not look. You find Mrs. Evans and shake your head before she even asks. She nods, thanks you, and closes the door with a finality that hurts. At your desk, you take out the list again, adding a fresh line. Tom Evans, missing, checked creek, pasture, old mill, no sign. You run your finger down the page, reading the names of others. The miner who never came back from the hills. The peddler who vanished between here and the next town. The little girl who chased a butterfly and was gone before the sun set. You close the notebook and slide it away. You tell yourself you will try again tomorrow. Maybe someone will find a clue, or maybe Tom will stumble home with a story about getting lost, or drunk, or just tired of it all. You hope for it, the way you hope for rain, or peace, or the end of your own loneliness. But you know better. In a place like this, people go missing all the time. Sometimes you look, sometimes you find, sometimes you just write down the name and move on. It is not justice, it is not mercy, it is just the way things are. As dusk settles over the town, you sit by the window, watching the horizon for a shape that never appears. You wonder who will come knocking tomorrow. You wonder how long your own name will stay off that list. And then you get up, close the door, and wait for the next disappearance. As the sun sinks and the shadows grow long, your mind turns to the kind of worry that settles in your chest like a rock. The fear that something or someone is coming. This fear is never named out loud, not in the saloon, not on the street, not even among the townsfolk gathered for Sunday service. But it is always there, thick and silent, living in the pauses between laughter, clinging to the corners of every room, following you like your own shadow. You know why. You know every rumor, every story. Stories of bands of outlaws sweeping down from the hills, faces hidden behind scarves, and pistols glinting in the moonlight. Stories of cattle raids, barn fires, whole families disappearing in the dark. Stories of Indian war parties, though truth and rumor have become so tangled over the years that you are not sure what is worse, what you have heard or what you have seen. You keep your pistol close and your rifle closer. Each night, as the last of the daylight bleeds away, you check the locks on the jail, on your home, on the door of the tiny general store next door. You know they are useless, more gesture than protection, but you do it anyway. Routine is all that stands between you and the slow creep of panic. You try not to look at the gaps under the doors, the cracks in the window frames. It would not take much. One boot, one shoulder, and half the town would be open to the night. The fear is contagious. You see it in the faces of the townsfolk as they hurry home after sunset, casting nervous glances over their shoulders. Even the dogs are quieter, sticking close to doorways, ears pricked for the wrong kind of sound. Children are called inside early, their laughter dying on the wind. The only people out after dark are the desperate, the drunk, or the dangerous, and of course, you. You make your rounds each night, boots silent on the packed earth, eyes straining for any movement that is not supposed to be there. Sometimes you catch sight of a figure darting between buildings, a boy sneaking home late, a stray dog searching for scraps, the outline of a horse and rider passing on the far edge of the settlement. Every shape is suspect. Every sound could be the start of something terrible. There are nights when nothing happens. You walk the same circle, listening to your own heartbeat, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft shifting of the wind through dry grass. There are nights when you find footprints where there should be none, or the sharp edge of a broken fence that was whole at dusk. There are nights when you hear voices in the dark, soft, urgent, not quite close enough to understand. You freeze, hand on your gun, breath held tight, until the voices fade and the silence returns. You remember the stories your predecessor told you back when you first took the badge. Stories of ambushes in the dark, of men disappearing from their beds, of gunfire erupting from the hills with no warning. He told you that the trick was not to let fear settle in your bones. You wonder if he ever managed it, or if he was just a better liar than you. One night, you wake from a shallow sleep to the sound of footsteps outside your window. You lie still, every muscle tensed, listening to the slow crunch of boots on gravel. The footsteps pause, then move on. You get up, check the street, see nothing but the moon and your own breath in the cold air. In the morning, you find a set of tracks, smaller than a man's, but deeper than a child's, leading from your yard toward the edge of town. You follow them as far as you dare, then turn back, telling yourself it was nothing. Some nights, it is just the wind. Some nights, it is not. The townsfolk expect you to be brave. They expect you to stand between them and whatever is out there. You play your part as best you can, but you know the truth. Fear is not something you can arrest or outshoot or send running with a warning. Fear is a presence, a companion, a voice in your ear reminding you of how thin the walls are, how far away help is, how little stands between order and chaos. You try to keep up appearances. You tell jokes, pat children on the head, help carry sacks of flour and mend broken fences. You say things like, "It will be fine and no trouble tonight," and "I am just a shout away." You say these things not because you believe them, but because someone has to. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to live without this worry, to sleep without a gun under your pillow, to walk the town at night without looking over your shoulder, to trust that tomorrow will not bring something worse than today. You cannot imagine it. Out here, you live with fear the way you live with dust and hunger and disappointment. It is always there, and it is always just waiting to see if you will falter. You walk your last round of the night, checking every door, every shadow, every corner. You pass the church, the saloon, the dark windows of the houses where the town's meager hope flickers in the candlelight. You listen for the wrong sound and hear only your own footsteps, steady and slow, echoing in the emptiness. Back in your room, you set your gun by your bed, the cold metal a comfort and a warning. You close your eyes and wait for sleep, knowing that tonight, like every night, you will wake at the slightest noise. Fear is patient. It knows you are too. Once the sun is up again, burning away the thin veil of sleep you managed to catch, you turn your attention to paperwork. For a sheriff, paperwork is not a matter of law, but of ritual, another pointless gesture performed in the hope that the world is still paying attention. The county requires reports. You know this because the last sheriff told you, and the one before that left a stack of yellowed letters in the back drawer, each more desperate and ignored than the last. You take out your writing kit, a bottle of cheap ink, half dried, a bent nibbed pen, a stack of government issue paper. The pen catches and blots. The ink seeps through, but you write anyway. The paper smells like the past and sounds like defeat. You begin, as always, with the date written out in full. No shortcuts here, not for official business. You list the town, the population, which you guess because no one counts, and the weather, hot and dry, hot and windy, or just hot. Then comes the part that never changes. Nothing to report except the usual minor disputes, missing livestock, one disappearance, no progress. You force yourself to write it differently each week, but you know it is pointless. The shape of the misery never changes, only the names and the number of complaints. Sometimes you try to be clever. Sometimes you pile up the details as if a mountain of words will force someone to notice. Between the hours of midnight and dawn, Mrs. Johnson lost a hen. The culprit is suspected to be either a fox, a neighbor, or fate. The matter remains unresolved. You end with your name, each letter formed carefully, your title added beneath. You let the ink dry, wave the sheet in the air, and read it back to yourself. It sounds both too much and not enough. You seal the letter, address it to the county seat, a place you have never seen and will never visit. The mail is picked up once a week by whoever is heading that way. Sometimes it is the stagecoach driver, sometimes the undertaker, sometimes the preacher who claims he has business with souls that need saving. You place the letter on the pile near the door. There are already several there. Some are weeks old, the edges curled, the seals brittle with age. You try not to think about what happens to them. Some make it as far as the next town and are used to start a fire on a cold morning. Others are lost in the bottom of a wagon, forgotten beneath sacks of flour and bolts of cloth. A rare few might arrive at an office somewhere, where a tired clerk with ink-stained fingers reads your words and sighs, then adds your report to a file that grows thicker every year. You have never received a reply, not once. The first few months, you checked the post diligently, hoping for something, advice, a reprimand, even a new pencil, but nothing ever came. Now, when the mail arrives, it brings only bad news. Bills, threats from creditors, the occasional letter from a distant relative begging for help. The rest you burn or let pile up in the corner, yellowing quietly in the gloom. Sometimes you think about writing a different letter, one that tells the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This town is dying. The people are tired. I am tired. The ground is too hard for planting, and the sky is too close for hope. Send help or do not. It makes no difference. Nobody cares. You never do, of course. Instead, you keep to the forms, the format, the polite fiction that someone is listening. You imagine the county seat as a place of endless order, tall buildings, clean streets, men in crisp suits who would laugh to see the mud on your boots and the holes in your hat. You wonder what they would make of your life, your town, your list of troubles that never seem to end. There is comfort in the routine, if nothing else. You pour yourself a cup of cold coffee, sift through the stack of unsent letters, and think about burning them all. You do not. You tuck them into a folder, label it correspondence, and place it on the shelf with the rest. Maybe someday someone will come through and read your words, piecing together the slow decay of a place forgotten by everyone but its own residents. Later, as you walk down the main street, you spot the stagecoach creaking out of town, a plume of dust trailing behind it. You know your letter is somewhere in that heap of baggage, bumping along the road to nowhere. Maybe it will get there this time. Maybe not. You stop by the postmaster's window and ask, out of habit, if anything has come for you. He shakes his head, not bothering to hide his boredom. Nothing this week, Sheriff. Maybe next time. He says it every week. He will say it every week until one of you is gone. You return to your office, feeling the silence settle around you like a second skin. The letters are still there, stacked and waiting, a testimony to your stubborn hope or your endless futility. You pick up the pen and begin the next report because that is what is expected and because it gives you something to do besides wait for answers that will never come. Out here, the mail is like hope, slow to arrive, quick to disappear, and always, always lost somewhere between what you need and what you get. It is late afternoon when the next knock comes. A different rhythm, softer, as if whoever is on the other side would rather not be there. You open the door to find young Sally Dunn clutching her arm, her face a mix of embarrassment and pain. She says she tripped in the street, fell on a bottle someone left near the saloon. You do not ask who left it. You already know the answer, and so does everyone else. You wave her in and gesture to the rickety chair by your desk. The jail is not a doctor's office, but it might as well be. The only real doctor left on the last stage 3 years ago, leaving behind a box of supplies and a handful of advice that amounts to try not to get sick. You fetch your kit, a battered tin box, once bright red, now faded to a dull, guilty brown. Inside is the sum total of medical science for a town like this: a roll of old bandages, a bottle of spirits so harsh it is best not to ask what kind, a needle and thread, and some willow bark for the kind of pain that settles in your bones. You sit Sally down, ask her to show you the arm. She hesitates, then rolls up her sleeve, revealing a nasty gash, ringed with dirt and already starting to swell. You wince, she notices, and tries to smile. It is not so bad, she says, though you can see she is fighting tears. It will be fine, you lie, because there is nothing else to say. You pour spirits over the wound, watching her grit her teeth and squeeze her eyes shut. The smell fills the room, sharp and raw, making your own eyes water. You dab at the cut with the last of your clean cloths, then wrap it with a bandage that once belonged to a miner who lost a finger in the blacksmith's forge. Everything here is used and reused, patched and repurposed, because nothing new ever stays new for long. Sally thanks you, voice shaking, and you give her a sip of the spirits to chase away the sting. She coughs, sputters, and manages a laugh. Tastes like fire, she says, and you agree. You walk her to the door, Watch her disappear into the growing dusk and wonder how long it will be before she is back. Another scrape, another bruise, another reminder of how fragile everyone is out here. You sit back down, glancing at your medical kit. The supplies are almost gone. The next time someone comes in bleeding, you might have nothing left but hope and prayer. You make a note to ask the general store for more cloth, more spirits, more thread, though you know they will shrug and say the next shipment is weeks away. That is always the answer, no matter what you are asking for. The line between sheriff and doctor is thin, and you cross it more often than you would like. You have set bones, stitched wounds, pulled teeth with pliers meant for horses. Sometimes you even help bring a baby into the world, though you always hope someone else will be there to take over before you drop the child in a panic. People thank you as if you have performed a miracle. You always feel like you have barely kept disaster at bay. When you are not treating wounds, you dispense advice, drink water, rest, pray, avoid the snake bite. For snake bite, your options are limited. Spirits if you have them, willow bark if you do not, and a quick knife if the bite is bad. Most of the time, you just hope the patient is luckier than most. You remember the last serious injury, a ranch hand kicked in the head by a wild horse. You did what you could, but it was not enough. The preacher came and said a few words, and the family buried him behind the church with the others. You felt the eyes of the town on you for days afterward, as if you were the one who had thrown the kick. You keep the bottle of spirits on your desk now, just in case. Sometimes you take a swig yourself when the pain in your back or your head gets too loud to ignore. You remind yourself not to overdo it. The line between medic and patient blurs quickly here, and you cannot afford to lose your own balance. As the evening settles in, someone else appears at your door, this time a man with a splinter in his hand, then a woman with a fever, then a child with a rash that might be from the river or from the bugs that infest every bed in town. You do what you can, knowing it will never be enough. Each time, you send them home with a bandage, a prayer, or a scrap of willow bark, and a warning to come back if things get worse. You sit alone in the dim light, surrounded by the smell of spirits and old sweat, and wonder what it must be like to live somewhere with a real doctor, real supplies, real hope. You write another note to the county. More bandages needed, more medicine if possible. You know you will never hear back. For now, you close your kit, wipe your hands on your trousers, and try to forget the sight of blood on your fingers. Tomorrow, someone else will knock. Tomorrow, someone else will need you. Out here, you are the last line of defense against the slow, steady march of pain and sickness. You do what you can and hope it will be enough. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder if hope itself is just another medicine you will run out of soon. You return home later than you intended, feet dragging, head pounding from the stale air and the endless needs of everyone else. Home is a word you say out of habit, as if repeating it often enough will make it true. In reality, your house is just another wooden box, not much different from the jail except for the smell, a mixture of cooking grease, soap, and something less identifiable that you choose not to name. Your wife is already awake when you come in, standing by the stove with her back to you. She does not turn. She knows it is you by the sound of your boots, the slow, tired scrape that never changes no matter the day. The children are scattered around the room. Your eldest son, tall and sullen, hunches over a chipped table, scratching something into the wood with a nail. Your youngest is curled on the floor, asleep with a doll stitched from scraps of old dress. The middle one, your only daughter, sits on the front step, braiding and unbraiding her hair, her eyes always searching the street for a reason to hope. You nod to your wife, who nods back. The unspoken language of two people stretched too thin, sharing a house, but not a life. You try to remember the last time you sat down for a meal together. You try to remember the last time you laughed at something that was not someone else's misfortune. Both memories evade you, lost under the weight of chores, worries, and the constant grind of survival. There is food of a kind, a pot of beans, a crust of bread, a scrap of salted pork that tastes of nothing but salt. You eat quietly, aware of your wife watching you out of the corner of her eye, counting every bite, calculating what will be left for tomorrow. The children eat without speaking. The silence is almost comforting. It means nobody is arguing, at least for now. After the meal, you try to talk to your son. You ask about school, about the farm, about anything you can think of that does not involve missing livestock or another neighbor's complaint. He shrugs, never meeting your eyes, and mumbles that everything is fine. You know it is not. You remember being his age, full of restless anger and the kind of hope that sours quickly. You want to tell him it will get better, but you cannot bring yourself to lie. Instead, you tell him to help his mother with the dishes, and he stomps off, muttering curses he thinks you cannot hear. Your daughter is easier for now. She asks about your day, about the horses, about the bad men you sometimes chase. You answer in vague stories, leaving out the details, leaving out the boredom, the danger, the slow drip of disappointment. She wants you to be a hero, the kind she has read about in battered penny novels passed from house to house. You want her to believe in something, so you let her. Your youngest wakes, rubs her eyes, and toddles over for a hug. You pick her up, her arms light as sticks, her head heavy against your chest. For a moment, you remember what it felt like to hope. For a moment, you let yourself believe you are doing enough. Then she squirms away, chasing the cat into the other room. Your wife stands at the door, arms crossed, her face set in that unreadable mask you have grown to know too well. You try to say something, anything, about the weather, the store, the chickens, but she cuts you off with a sigh. You are late again, she says, voice low but sharp. Someone needed help, you reply. Someone always needs help, she says, and you have no answer. The words hang between you like laundry on a line, heavy and damp. You want to explain, to justify, to remind her that you are doing your best. But your best is never enough. Not for her, not for the town, not for yourself, She tells you the roof is leaking again, that the stove is running low on wood, that the well water tastes worse than usual. She tells you that the children are growing too fast, that your son has been skipping school, that your daughter wants to leave for the city when she is old enough. She tells you all the things you already know, as if saying them out loud will make them easier to bear. You listen because that is what is left to you. You nod, promise to look at the roof tomorrow, to haul more wood, to talk to the boy. You say you will find time, but you both know time is something you never have. You are a sheriff first, a father second, a husband third, if at all. When night falls, you sit by the window and watch the darkness gather. Your wife puts the children to bed, her voice softening for their sake, though it never softens for you. You hear her humming a song from her own childhood, a song about rivers and green fields and places you will never see. You wonder what she dreams about at night, if she dreams at all. Sometimes you fall asleep in the chair, gun at your side, badge still pinned to your shirt. Sometimes you wake in the middle of the night, the weight of the house pressing down, the silence thick and suffocating. You look over at your wife, her back turned, her breathing slow and steady. You think about reaching out, but you never do. There is too much distance, too many things unsaid. In the morning, you rise before dawn, careful not to wake anyone. You pull on your boots, shoulder your responsibilities, and slip out into the gray light. Your family sleeps behind you, untouched by your absence, unchanged by your presence. You tell yourself you are doing it for them. You tell yourself they understand. The truth is simpler and sadder. This is not a life. It is a series of chores, a collection of worries, an endless struggle to keep going. Family is something you remember, not something you live. You close the door softly behind you, already thinking of the next complaint, the next crisis, the next reason to stay away until the sun is down. Out here, love is just another thing that gets worn down by the dust and the wind and the endless need for one more day. No sooner have you begun to imagine a moment's peace than the pounding of hooves and the shrill, breathless shout of a child crack the early stillness. Someone's seen a stranger, they say, a man on a bay horse, riding hard, cloak dark and face unknown, cutting through the edge of town like a bad omen. Your wife watches from the porch, arms folded, as you buckle your gun belt, grab your hat, and step out into the street, the world's worries already settling back onto your shoulders. The townsfolk gather in little knots, whispering and gesturing toward the horizon. The same rumors surface over and over: a horse thief, a rustler, a drifter with blood on his hands. Nobody ever agrees on the details. They all look to you. This is your job, after all, to be the one who rides out after shadows, to fetch back stolen things, or, at the very least, to try. You collect your deputy, who is none too eager, but will not say no in front of the crowd. Together, you saddle your horses. Your own mount is as tired as you are, flanks streaked with sweat before you even leave town. You remind yourself that both of you are still here, which must account for something. The pursuit is a ritual, like everything else here. First, you try to follow tracks, hoof prints, the scuff of a boot, broken grass leading away from the road. The prairie is dry, and the wind is quick to cover all sins. It is not long before you lose the trail. You press on anyway, guided by nothing more than the suspicion that if you give up too soon, you will never hear the end of it. The sun beats down relentless. Your shirt clings to your back, and the dust grits between your teeth. Sweat trickles down your spine, mixing with the old ache in your bones, the soreness that never really leaves. Your deputy rides behind you, grumbling under his breath, but you ignore him. There is only the open land, empty and flat, stretching toward forever. Every so often, you find a sign, a fresh turd, a bit of cloth snagged on a bush, a cigarette butt crushed into the dirt. Each clue raises hope, but hope is cheap out here. You know better than to trust it. You keep going, because that is what sheriffs do. The pursuit takes you through places you would rather avoid. The dried up creek bed, where snakes lie curled in the shade and bones bleach in the sun. The old mining road, pocked with holes and half swallowed by weeds. The line of low hills that look harmless at a distance, but hold more secrets than any ledger. You remember stories of real outlaws, the kind with rewards on their heads and blood in their past. You remember tales of shootouts and last stands, but mostly what you find is nothing: emptiness, silence, and the echo of your own doubts. Hours pass. The sky grows thick and heavy. Thunderheads bunch in the west, promising a storm. You push your horse harder, feeling the impatience in your gut, the sour taste of another failure building behind your teeth. Your deputy wants to turn back. He makes excuses: a sore ankle, a nagging hunger, the fear of rain. You snap at him, not because you believe you will find your man, but because giving up feels too much like surrender. Eventually, you do catch up. At the edge of a shallow draw, you spot a rider slumped in the saddle, horse limping, hat pulled low. You approach slow, gun ready, but there is no fight left in either man or beast. The stranger turns, and you see his face, just a boy, really, no older than your own eldest, eyes wild with fear and hunger. His coat is torn, his lips cracked. He has no weapon, only a scrap of bread and a look that says he has not slept in days. You lower your gun and ask his name. He mumbles something you do not catch. You ask what he is running from, but he just shakes his head. Maybe it is the law. Maybe it is hunger. Maybe it is nothing at all. He says he was only trying to find work, or shelter, or a place to rest. His horse, he says, was not stolen. He borrowed it from a cousin, meant to bring it back. You do not believe him. You do not disbelieve him either. Out here, everyone is running from something. You haul the boy up behind you on your horse. The return ride is slower, heavier. The sky opens, rain turning the road to mud, soaking you to the skin. By the time you get back, your boots are full of water and your heart is as heavy as your coat. The townsfolk gather again, hopeful for justice, for excitement, for a story they can retell over whiskey and cards. but there is nothing to tell. The boy is no outlaw, just another soul in a world with no room for weakness. You put him in the cell for the night, give him a crust of bread and a blanket, promise to talk to him in the morning. Your deputy disappears, muttering about the injustice of it all. As the rain drums on the roof, you sit by the barred window, watching the water carve channels through the dirt. You wonder what you would do if you had somewhere else to go, someone else to be. You wonder if there is any difference between chasing shadows and being one. When you finally go home, your wife is already asleep, the children silent in their beds. You stand at the window, listening to the wind and the distant, rumbling thunder, and you realize the pursuit is never really about the man you are chasing. It is about proving every day that you are still willing to try, even if all you find at the end is mud, sweat, and emptiness. The rain does not last long. Out here, nothing ever does, except the dying. As dawn rolls over the hills, you know before you even step outside that today will be another day for a funeral. They happen with a regularity that makes them feel less like tragedies and more like chores. Something to check off, a necessary pause in the machinery of disappointment. Word spreads fast. There are not many secrets in a town this small, and death is the worst kept secret of all. You see it in the way people gather, silent knots at street corners, hands in pockets, eyes averted as you pass. They all expect you to take charge, as if the badge on your chest is some magic talisman against grief. Today, it is Old Man Wicks. He died in his sleep, they say, though you know better. Nobody here dies peacefully, not really. They die worn out, used up, their bodies given over to the same rot that works its way through every fence post and floorboard. Wicks was no different. His breath rattled for weeks, his face drawn tight with pain. When his granddaughter came to fetch you, she did not cry. She just asked if you could help dig the grave. You do. You always do. The town cannot afford a real undertaker. He left months ago, chasing rumors of gold out west. That leaves you and whatever men you can guilt into lending a hand. You find two volunteers at the saloon, their willingness owed more to boredom and the promise of a free drink than to any affection for the dead. You take the shovels and the rough pine box that serves as a coffin and walk out to the churchyard. The earth is hard, stingy with what little softness it has left. Digging a grave is slow work. The sun bears down, sweat runs into your eyes, and your hands blister in the same places they always do. The other men joke quietly, the way people do when they want to keep their fear at bay. You laugh along, not because it is funny, but because silence is worse. The funeral itself is brief. There is no choir, just the wind and the sullen crows perched on the fence. The preacher reads a few lines from the Bible, his voice thin and tired. He talks about rest and peace and a better place, but nobody really listens. The words blow away on the breeze, lost before they reach the sky. Wicks's granddaughter stands alone at the edge of the grave, her eyes fixed on the ground. You want to say something, but you have nothing left to offer. The men lower the box with rough hands. dirt sliding from the mound, thudding on the lid. The sound is dull, final. Someone coughs, someone spits, and just like that, it is over. The crowd breaks apart, scattering like leaves. No one lingers. The living have things to do. You fill in the grave with slow, heavy shovelfuls, the work numbing and familiar. The sweat dries on your skin, the ache in your back sharpens, and you think about how many times you have stood here, how many times you will stand here again. Sometimes you wonder if it will ever be your turn, and if anyone will bother to dig deep. There is no time for mourning. By noon, you are back at your desk, boots caked with dirt, hands stained. The preacher stops by, leaves a slip of paper with the name and date for your records. You write it down in the big book you keep, the one where every death is reduced to a line. Wicks, Samuel, found dead in bed, cause unknown, buried behind the church. You close the book and stack it on the others, a slow growing archive of loss. The rest of the day unfolds like any other. Complaints, errands, another petty theft. You wonder if people feel relieved after a funeral, or if the shadow just grows longer. Grief here is private, short lived, and easily drowned in chores or whiskey. That evening, as you walk the main street, you catch sight of the newly turned earth. The sun is setting, the crows have found something else to do, and the church bell does not ring. It only rings for the first funeral in a family. After that, silence. You think about all the graves scattered through the brush, unmarked but not forgotten, and about how every family here has lost someone. Death is not dramatic. There are no duels at dawn, no last words worth carving in stone. Most people die quietly, bit by bit, until one morning they simply do not get up. A few go in pain, a fever, a broken bone gone bad, a bullet meant for someone else. You do what you can, but you are no doctor, no miracle worker. Sometimes you think your main job is not to prevent death, but to tidy up after it. The dead are soon replaced by the living, and life stumbles on. Children chase chickens through the grass. Someone laughs at a joke in the saloon, and the cycle starts again. You return home, wash the dirt from your hands, and sit at the table with your family, who say nothing about where you have been. The meal is the same as always, the conversation thin and practical. Afterward, you step outside and look up at the stars, feeling the weight of the ground beneath your feet. You tell yourself that death is just another part of the job. But sometimes, in the small hours of the night, you wake to the sound of your own breath, and you wonder who will write your name in the book when your time comes. Out here, funerals are a routine. Grief is a luxury, and memory is a burden everyone carries, quiet and unremarked, beneath the dust and the silence. The day after a funeral is always quiet at first. People move slower, voices are softer, as if the whole town is afraid of drawing attention from whatever spirit might still be lingering. You would think that loss might draw people together, but more often it leaves everyone retreating into their own corners, suspicious, wary, watching for the next bit of bad luck to drift their way. It is in these moments of uneasy peace that corruption finds you. Not the grand, cinematic kind, but the slow, seeping rot that settles into the cracks of daily life. It is as constant as the wind, as patient as dust, and as hard to root out as the weeds in your own yard. You do not talk about it. Nobody does. But it is there, woven into the habits and bargains and looks exchanged in the space between one word and the next. You see it in the way old Mrs. Baker comes by with a pie and a request. My grandson's just a boy, she says, all innocence and trembling hands. He did not mean to break that window. Perhaps you could let it go, just this once. The pie is cold, the crust tough, but the real message is always the same. Everybody has something to trade. Sometimes it is food, sometimes a favor, sometimes just the silent hope that you will look the other way. You would like to think yourself immune. You are not. Sometimes you take the pie. Sometimes you take the story, pretend to believe it, nod, and write nothing in your book. Other times you feel the sharp sting of your own pride and refuse, only to wake in the night regretting it. You remember the faces, tired, hopeful, desperate. They are not bad people, not really. They are just trying to survive, like you. Then there are the bigger things. A crate of whiskey offloaded in the dark behind the saloon, a shipment of flour that goes missing on the way to the general store. You know who is behind it. Everybody does. If you pushed too hard, if you wrote too many names in your ledger, you would find yourself alone very quickly. Law, here, is less about rules and more about balance, knowing which fights to pick and which to ignore. You close your eyes and tell yourself you are keeping the peace. Sometimes people try to buy you outright. Cash on the table, promises of half a steer, a corner lot, a piece of land you know is worth less than the ink in your pen. You always refuse, not because you are noble, but because you know how quickly stories travel. If you take money, it is only a matter of time before the next man offers more, or the wrong man hears about it. So you stick to favors and pie, and the silent aching knowledge that every decision you make is another compromise. The worst is when they ask for things you cannot give. Please, Sheriff, my boy is in trouble. Do not put his name in the book. Please, Sheriff, my husband just needs a little more time. Please, Sheriff, forget what you saw tonight. You hear these pleas more often than you want to admit. Each one chips away at your resolve, leaves you more tired, more alone. You wish you could help them all. You wish you could help yourself. Despair creeps in on silent feet. It comes not in the big failures, but in the thousand tiny surrenders. A warning instead of a fine, a blind eye instead of an accusation, a shrug instead of an answer. It seeps into your bones, makes you heavy and slow. Some days you wonder if the town even needs a sheriff, or if all you do is keep track of the slow, steady decline. Your deputy, for all his bluster, feels it too. He complains, grumbles about the unfairness of things, but you can see the weight settling on his shoulders. He drinks more now, spends more time in the shadows of the saloon, trying to find relief at the bottom of a glass. You want to talk to him about it, to warn him not to let it get too deep. But what would you say? You are no better. You just carry your despair in silence. At night, the wind rattles the window panes. You sit at your desk, the lamp burning low, and reread the names in your notebook. Some you let off easy, some you punished hard. You cannot remember which is which anymore. You pour yourself a finger of spirits and stare into the flame, searching for answers. All you find is the echo of your own disappointment. You wonder what justice means out here. Is it really about fairness, or just about keeping the peace until the next disaster? Is it about upholding the law, or about making sure nobody gets desperate enough to burn the whole place down? You tell yourself it is the former, but your hands tell a different story. When dawn comes, you go through the motions. Another round of complaints, another missing goat, another neighbor asking for mercy. You promise yourself you will be stronger this time. You promise yourself you will do better. But the day wears on, and the same old bargains are struck. The pie, the plea, the shrug. One more compromise. Corruption is not a storm, not a landslide. It is the slow, steady rain that wears away the stone. And despair is the puddle that forms, quiet and bottomless, at your feet. You do not talk about it. Nobody does. But every day, you carry it with you, your most faithful companions on this long, dusty road. Every town on the edge of nowhere wants to believe in justice. You see it in the way people talk about the law, about right and wrong, about how a man gets what he deserves, and every debt will be repaid. They say these things because saying them is easier than admitting that out here, justice is a story for children and fools, a word spoken in church and forgotten by supper. You sit in your office, boots on the desk, eyes on the sun that moves slow and sullen through the grimy window. The badge on your chest feels heavier every day. Your notebook is full of names, dates, offenses, and verdicts, but none of it adds up to order. It is a record of entropy, not resolution, a ledger of minor chaos, punctuated by the occasional catastrophe. There are moments, sometimes, when you almost believe. When the guilty confess, when the stolen goods turn up on someone's porch, when a fight ends with a handshake instead of a knife. In those moments, people look to you with something like respect. They call you sheriff, sometimes even sir. They want you to be a symbol, a pillar, the walking proof that justice is possible. But those moments are rare, fragile as glass, and always followed by the return of ordinary, grinding reality. You hold court as you always do, on the porch, in the street, anywhere the shade is better than the sun. The cases are petty: an argument over a bucket, a broken window, a dog that bit a child. Each side comes to you expecting vindication. Each side is sure the law is on their side. You listen, you nod, you issue your verdict. Half the time, nobody listens. The other half, they listen but grumble, convinced you are either corrupt or incompetent or both. There is no higher authority to appeal to. The county never replies. There are no circuit judges, no marshals passing through, no cavalry riding in to restore order. Just you and your badge, and whatever authority you can cobble together from habit and tiredness. You know what the town expects: a sheriff who can settle every quarrel, restore every lost possession, punish every thief, comfort every victim. But what you know is that law here is not about justice, it is about survival. The man who shouts loudest, who draws quickest, who gets the most neighbors on his side, is the man who wins. The rules change with every new complaint. Sometimes justice is a coin tossed behind the saloon, or a knife flashed in a dark alley, or a fist fight behind the livery. You break up brawls, patch up wounds, send men home with threats you hope you never have to carry out. Once in a while, someone comes to you with a real crime: a missing child, a dead mule, a burned barn. You investigate as best you can, but most of the time, the trail runs cold, and you are left writing another unsolved case in your notebook. The people are quick to accuse, slow to forgive. Grudges linger for years, sometimes longer than the people who hold them. You know every old feud, every boundary dispute, every whispered accusation passed from house to house. You keep the peace, or the appearance of it, mostly by standing between the angriest parties and talking until their anger burns out. There are those who still believe in justice: the preacher, the school teacher, the children too young to know better. You envy them sometimes. You remember being young, the taste of hope on your tongue, the certainty that wrongs would be righted. Now you know better. Now you see that justice is a thing people invent to make sense of their own disappointments. Your deputy, restless and bitter, mutters about running off to a bigger town, somewhere the law means more than a tired man with a tin star. He says he wants to see real justice, real order. You tell him it is the same everywhere, just with better hats and more paperwork. He does not believe you. You do not blame him. You barely believe yourself. In the evening, after the last complaint has been heard and the last grudge aired, you walk the main street. The sun sets, the sky bruises, and the shadows grow long. People lock their doors, bar their windows, and pray nothing bad will happen before dawn. You stop by the church, listen to the preacher's voice drifting out into the dusk, talking about forgiveness and redemption and the scales of justice. You wonder if even he believes his own words. Back at home, you find your family already asleep. You stand at the window, staring out at the town you are meant to protect, and try to remember the last time you saw justice done, the real kind, the kind that leaves everyone satisfied. You cannot. Maybe it never happened. Maybe you only dreamed it once when you were young and foolish. You sit at your desk, turn the pages of your notebook, and write a new entry. Dispute over boundary, both sides unsatisfied, no resolution. It is the same as all the others. Justice, out here, is an illusion, a story you tell yourself so you can sleep at night, a story you tell the town so they can pretend to believe. You are not sure who you are lying to anymore. But when morning comes, you put on your badge, pick up your notebook, and tell yourself that tomorrow might be different. You know it will not be, but you wait anyway. There is no such thing as a gentle storm on the edge of nowhere. When the sky finally decides to break, it does so without warning and without mercy. You wake in the early gray to a hush that feels wrong, like the world has paused to take a breath. The air is heavy, close, buzzing with static. You have lived here long enough to know what comes next. It starts with a trickle, fat drops on the roof, the slow, uncertain pitter patter that fools you into hope. Maybe it will pass, you think. Just a quick wash before the sun comes back. You stand at the door, mug in hand, watching the clouds bunch and bruise on the horizon. By the time you finish your coffee, the rain is coming in sheets, turning the street to muck, hammering the rooftops so hard it drowns out every other sound. The town reacts as it always does, a scramble, a frantic gathering of anything that might be ruined by water. You see Mrs. Johnson dragging her hens inside, the blacksmith slamming shutters, children shouting as they chase leaking buckets from room to room. The wind howls, rattling every loose board, sending grit and leaves spinning through the gaps. You check your own windows, shove a rag under the door, and pray the roof will hold this time. But it never does. The water finds its way through every crack, drips down the walls, pools beneath your feet. The jail is worse, one long trickle from the ceiling to the floor, gathering in the corner where the cell sits empty. The mattress is soaked before you even realize, the stench of wet straw mixing with the mold and the sourness of old sweat. You try to mop it up, but it is like trying to catch the rain itself. The bucket fills, overflows, fills again. You know better than to expect help. Everyone is too busy with their own disasters. You step out into the street, boots sinking ankle deep in mud, and make your rounds. You check on the saloon where the bartender is bailing water with a soup pot, his curses louder than the storm. At the general store, Mrs. Kramer is sweeping water out the back door, teeth clenched, jaw set. She tells you this happens every year, but you know it gets worse each time. The schoolhouse roof caves in around midday, sending children shrieking out into the rain, their lessons forgotten. The teacher stands in the doorway, arms raised as if she can hold back the flood with nothing but willpower. You lend a hand, piling desks against the worst of the leaks, but it is a losing battle. The chalkboards warp, the books curl, the stove goes cold and useless. Someone's barn collapses on the north edge of town, cows bawling in the mud, a horse limping through the ruins, the owner howling at the sky as if it will answer. You help pull boards free, mud sucking at your boots, the cold seeping up into your bones. There are no miracles, only small salvations. A calf dragged out by its ears, a sack of feed that might still be dry in the middle. By dusk, the rain is still falling, steadier now, as if the sky has settled in for the long haul. The streets are rivers, the bridges washing thin, the outhouse at the jail knocked clean off its hole and drifting sideways toward the saloon. Children laugh at first, chasing sticks and frogs, but the fun turns to fear when the water keeps rising. You check on your family, your wife grim, your eldest son already patching a hole in the roof with a plank and a prayer. The youngest children huddle in a dry corner, eyes wide, whispering stories to each other about the last great storm when the creek rose so high it took two goats and a wagon with it. Your wife says nothing, just meets your eyes, both of you knowing how close it can come to disaster. You light a lantern as the sun disappears, the whole town swallowed by gray and black. People drift to the church, which sits higher than most, a stubborn island of light in the gloom. You stand in the doorway, counting heads, watching for anyone left behind. Some folks mutter about God, some about bad luck, some just about the need for a new roof. The preacher leads a prayer for mercy, voice shaking but steady. You are the last to leave the street, sloshing through mud that threatens to pull your boots off with every step. You close up the jail as best you can, but water keeps dripping, keeps pooling, keeps making a mockery of your efforts. You take off your coat, wring it out, and sit in the dark, listening to the world drip and groan around you. There is no comfort in disaster, only the bitter knowledge that tomorrow will come and the damage will need to be reckoned with. Fences down, animals lost, food spoiled, tempers frayed. You know what the morning will bring: a dozen more complaints, a dozen more problems, all resting squarely on your shoulders. The storm keeps you awake most of the night. Thunder rolls over the hills. Lightning turns the sky white for a heartbeat at a time, and the sound of the rain never stops. You sit by the window, watching the street turn to a lake, and think about all the things you cannot fix. When dawn comes, the storm is gone, but the mud remains. The sun rises into a world sagging and battered, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and disappointment. You stand in the doorway, looking at the ruined street, and know that today will be another day for mending, another day for pretending that, with enough work, things might go back to normal. But normal never comes. Not really. Out here, disaster is just another word for everyday life. When the rain finally stops and the world becomes merely soggy instead of drowned, the town finds its way, like rats or drunks or both, back to the saloon. The saloon is the only place that welcomes everyone equally: the battered, the bitter, the bored, and the barely alive. It is the heart of the town, or perhaps its stomach, a place that digests hope and spits out something sour. You arrive after dark, boots thick with mud, badge hidden beneath your coat, more out of habit than pride. The swinging doors have lost their swing, hanging limp on their hinges, one of them propped open with a brick. Inside, the air is as warm and close as always, thick with the stink of wet wool, wood smoke, spilled whiskey, and that subtle undercurrent of despair that never seems to wash away. The regulars are already there, clumped in their usual corners. Some have their boots up, others their hopes down, but none seem in a hurry to do anything except drink and wait for the night to pass. The bartender, face set in a permanent grimace, polishes glasses with a rag that is dirtier than most of the floor. He pours drinks with the solemnity of a priest and listens to confessions with the boredom of a man who knows every sin by heart. Cards are played, coins clink, arguments begin and fizzle with practiced efficiency. Nobody here has the energy for a proper fight after a day like today. Instead, they insult each other quietly, the same words passed back and forth like a bottle with a hole in the bottom. Jenkins, the loudest, tries to rile up Baker over the price of oats again. This time, even Baker just shrugs, too tired for outrage. You wander the room, nodding to the ones who bother to look up. Someone offers you a drink. Someone else asks if you have found Mrs. Johnson's missing hen yet. You answer both with a shrug. If you sit at the barkeep slides you a mug of something dark and thin, as if daring you to complain. You do not. Out here, complaining is redundant. A pair of young men start a song in the corner, their voices rough and tuneless, but nobody stops them. For a moment, someone tries to clap along, but the effort fades. Music is just another background noise, like the groan of the wind through the walls or the creak of the sign outside. The piano sits untouched, keys missing, lid propped open with a broken broomstick. There is talk about fixing it. There is always talk about fixing things, but no one ever does. Most nights, the undertaker will play a dirge or two, but tonight he is home nursing a cold or a hangover or both. You break up a quarrel between two farmhands, both so drunk they can barely remember why they are angry. It ends not with a punch, but with both of them laughing until one of them vomits on the sawdust. You steer them apart, give the bartender a nod, and let the mess become tomorrow's problem. The women, such as they are, cluster by the stove, talking about nothing that matters, how the river is up, how the preacher's wife wears too much perfume, how the postman is surely stealing letters again. Their voices are soft, but their eyes are sharp. You nod, receive their stares, and keep moving. On nights like this, the saloon becomes the theater of the absurd. Everyone plays their part, says their lines, and waits for the curtain to fall. There's the town know-it-all, offering advice on how to fix the leaky roof, advice he never follows. There is the gambler, always losing, never paying, but always finding another sucker. There is the preacher, drinking lemonade and pretending it is whiskey, talking about the end times to anyone who will listen. Someone challenges you to a game of cards. You decline. It is not that you cannot use the money, it is just that you cannot spare the willpower. Instead, you lean against the bar, watching, waiting. You are not here to have fun, but to keep the peace, or at least to make sure the boredom does not become violence. It almost never does, not really. The fights here are as tired as the men who start them. A stray dog wanders in, shakes mud onto the floor, and is promptly adopted by the crowd. Someone feeds it a piece of bread, someone else pets its ears. For a moment, it is the only living thing in the room that looks genuinely happy. Time moves strangely in the saloon. Minutes stretch and collapse, the clock over the bar stuck between numbers, its hands twitching in indecision. The night drags on. Glasses empty and refill, voices rise and fall. The boredom becomes a comfort, the routine a lullaby. Eventually, you realize you have been leaning on the bar for an hour, or two, or forever. You push away, shoulders stiff, eyes heavy. You make one last circuit of the room. No new trouble, just the same old faces, the same old complaints, the same old laughter, worn thin and patched like everything else in town. You step outside into the darkness, the noise of the saloon trailing behind you like smoke. The air is cooler, the mud deeper, the world just a little quieter. Tomorrow it will all start again. Different complaints, different quarrels, same saloon, same people, same long wait for something to change. You walk home with your hands in your pockets, boots heavy with mud, and the feeling that, for all its noise, the saloon is the only place in town where anyone still pretends to forget how hard and small life has become. There is a strange sort of immortality in a town this small. Stories last longer than the people who lived them. Names become legends, then rumors, then half faded jokes. And if you live long enough, you become one of these stories, whether you want to or not. You hear them in the saloon, in the store, on the dusty porch outside the jail. The stories about sheriffs past, bigger than life, meaner than the desert sun. There is Sheriff Dalton, who shot 10 men before breakfast and hanged a horse thief for dessert. There is Sheriff O'Connor, who fought off a whole Comanche war party with nothing but a shovel and a prayer. And, of course, Sheriff Mackey, who took a bullet to the heart and finished his coffee before he died. Everyone knows these stories are nonsense. You know it too, but it does not matter. The point of a legend is not whether it happened. The point is to make the present a little less unbearable by pretending the past was heroic. You are the sheriff now, which means you are both audience and unwilling actor in the ongoing farce. The townsfolk want to believe you could be as tough, as clever, as lucky as any of the old names. When something goes wrong, a barn burns, a man disappears, a storm washes out the road, they look to you, not because you have a legend, but because you are here and the legends are not. It is a quiet kind of pressure, one that weighs on you in odd ways. The stories are always in the third person. They say the sheriff once, or back when Mackey wore the badge. Nobody ever tells stories about the sheriff standing ankle deep in mud, sorting through stolen chickens, or cleaning vomit out of the jail. Those are not the things worth remembering. They want blood, glory, and poetic justice. Sometimes, after a long day, you hear the legends repeated just outside your door, booming voices, laughter, the exaggerated gestures of men who have nothing left to do but talk. They say a real sheriff could outshoot any man west of the river. You ever seen this one draw? Heard he once stared down a mountain lion with nothing but a stick. Pity he can't keep a hen safe from Mrs. Johnson's neighbor. You listen, unseen, as your own myth takes shape in their mouths. Sometimes they make you a hero. Sometimes you are the punchline. Sometimes you are both in the same story. On slow evenings, you wonder what tales they will tell about you when you are gone. Will anyone mention the night you sat in the rain, watching the jail fill with water, waiting for trouble that never came? Will they talk about the morning you spent digging a grave for a man you barely knew, just because there was nobody else? Or will they remember the time you broke up a fight with a glare and a worn out threat, and everyone went back to their beer as if it meant something? You suspect not. The real memories are not worth much in the face of a good story. They will forget the sleepless nights, the worry, the small kindnesses, and the petty defeats. Instead, you will become whatever the town needs you to be: a ghost, a joke, a warning, a comfort. Some nights, the young ones gather in the alley and dare each other to sneak up to the jail and tap on the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary sheriff in his natural habitat. You play along sometimes, sit quietly in the half light, hat pulled low, a silhouette against the lamplight. You know that what they really want is not to see you, but to feel the possibility of something greater than the dust and boredom. Now and then, a stranger rides through and asks about the sheriff, the famous one. The bartender will lean in, eyes wide, and say, "Oh, he is right here," is quiet type, but he has seen things. You nod, play your part, and wait for the visitor to realize the truth. The only thing more disappointing than a legend is the real man underneath it. You keep a few stories for yourself, the true ones, the ones that do not sound like much, but weigh more than any legend could. The time you stopped a neighbor from beating his wife quietly without a badge and nobody ever thanked you. The morning you stood between two angry farmers and convinced them not to settle it with knives, just this once. The 100 small surrenders that kept the peace, if only for another hour. But you do not tell these stories, not out loud, not ever. They would only disappoint, and anyway, you are not sure you want them remembered. There is a sadness in knowing that what lasts is not the truth, but the story. That in 50 years, nobody will remember your face or your voice, only the tales told by men who drank too much and lived too hard. You try not to care, but some nights, as you drift to sleep with the wind rattling the shutters, you wonder if maybe you could have been a legend if things had been different. If the town had needed a hero instead of a caretaker. Tomorrow, the same old tales will be told, the same old jokes made. The legends will get taller, the sheriff more heroic or more useless, depending on the weather and the whiskey. And you, well, you will wake up, put on your badge, and try not to let the stories get in the way of what needs doing. In the end, you are not a legend. You are a man, and legends are for those who are already dead. At the end of the day, when the lamplight has faded and even the saloon has gone quiet, you walk home with feet dragging, the night pressing down on your shoulders like an old familiar coat. The streets are dark and empty, puddles of mud reflecting the indifferent stars. The wind picks up, scraping grit along the boards, making the buildings moan. You pause at your own doorstep, listening for trouble, listening for anything at all, and find only silence. Inside, your house is quiet. The children are asleep, sprawled like kittens in their beds, faces slack with the kind of peace only the exhausted can know. Your wife has left a plate out for you: cold beans, a crust of bread, a piece of cheese hard enough to break a tooth. You eat in silence, chewing slowly, letting the rhythm of the meal remind you that some routines persist no matter how much else changes. You wash the dishes, careful not to make noise. There is nothing left to say, nothing left to argue, only the echo of promises you cannot keep. You sit for a while in the rickety chair by the window, boots off, gun on the table, badge still pinned to your shirt. The house creaks as it settles, a tired sigh for another day survived. Through the window, you watch the world shrink to the size of your own reflection. You are older than you ever meant to be, your face a map of compromises, your eyes dull with sleeplessness. You tell yourself you are only resting, but your bones know better. Sleep comes slow, creeping in around the edges of your mind. You try to keep it at bay, afraid of what waits in your dreams, familiar faces, open graves, endless stretches of road leading nowhere. But fatigue is patient. It always wins. You haul yourself off the chair, stumble to the cot you share with your regrets, and lower yourself onto the thin mattress. Lying there, you feel the ache in your back, the soreness in your hands, the tightness in your chest that has nothing to do with illness and everything to do with the thousand invisible burdens you carry. Your wife turns away as you lie down. You are close enough to feel her warmth, but far enough to feel alone. You think about waking her, about saying something kind or honest, but the words are heavy and you are tired. The sounds of the night drift in, a dog barking, the distant slam of a shutter, the wind teasing at the eaves. Somewhere an owl calls, and somewhere else a baby cries. These noises are a kind of lullaby, a reminder that the world keeps moving even when you would rather it stopped. You try to count the days you have lived like this. You lose track quickly. Each day slides into the next. Each night erases the marks you have made, leaving you no closer to meaning than when you started. You remember your first night here, the badge bright and strange on your chest, hope in your heart, the whole town watching to see what you would become. Now the badge is dull, the hope gone, and the town only notices when something goes wrong. You wonder if you will ever leave. If you will wake up tomorrow and decide, finally, that you have had enough. You imagine packing a bag, climbing on your horse, and riding west into a place where no one knows your name, where the horizon is not a wall, but a door. But you know you will not. You are as much a part of this place as the dust and the creaking boards. The town would not change without you. It would just find a new man to wear the badge and bear the blame. As sleep overtakes you, you dream the same dreams as always. Sometimes you are running through the prairie, legs heavy, the sky so close it smothers you. Sometimes you are digging another grave, the earth cold and unforgiving. Sometimes you are back in the jail, the door locked, the key lost, the cell filling slowly with water. Morning comes, as it always does, gray and uncertain. The rooster crows, the children stir. Your wife is already up, stoking the stove, her face unreadable. You pull on your boots, check your gun, straighten your badge. You step outside into the same dusty street, the same stale air, the same world that greets you with indifference. You will walk your rounds. You will listen to complaints. You will write your useless letters and chase shadows and break up fights that never really end. You will mend what you can and ignore what you cannot. You will make promises you know you cannot keep, and you will try to believe them anyway. You do this because it is all there is, because the days are short and the nights are long, and because the difference between going on and giving up is just the weight of another sunrise. This is your life, Sheriff, not a legend, not a tragedy, not a story anyone will tell with pride. It is dust and hunger, hope and disappointment, and the endless struggle to survive one more day. You close your eyes for a moment, and then you begin again, and again, and again.